for this afternoon, which is Pause, Realign, Reboot, Restarting Your Career in Uncertain Times. We have with us Ms. Sujash Chandy. She is an experienced leader and mentor whose most recent experience was setting up and managing the first ever global digital hub for Nissan Motor Corporation in Trivandrum. Prior to that, she headed investment promotion and facilitation across sectors for Invest India. Invest India is a Government of India organization in New Delhi. She was responsible for setting up Agni, another Government of India initiative to accelerate innovation across the country. Her 2 decades of varied experience across multiple geographies include management consulting and large-scale program management. She's worked with Big 4 firms like KPMG and PwC in North America and India as well. Also with CGI, Canada's largest IT consulting and services provider. She's currently on a brief sabbatical before she takes up her next assignment in the coming weeks. We are lucky to have her joining us in from Spain. About the session itself, this session will explore why career breaks can be considered an opportunity to reassess, reprioritize, reskill, and rebuild our professional networks for making an even stronger comeback to the workplace or to start a business. We know that we are in uncertain times in the middle of the COVID-related lockdown and more lockdowns expected, as there are going to be waves of spikes in positive cases. So, which means businesses which will open soon might shut down again. Businesses which have stabilized would probably see a dip in business. So this session will cover some of the inherent risks of career transition and how to manage them effectively. Some handy online learning resources for utilizing your time efficiently will also be shared during this webinar. The prime focus when we started discussing about having a webinar like this was women on a career break, women who qualified, who've done well in their careers and then either got married and moved to a different place or had children and wanted to devote more time to the family. So we are looking at how Ms. Suja can give us tips on getting back to careers. But this doesn't mean that the session is particularly focused only on women. Over to you, Suja.
Thank you, Pavitra. Hello, everyone from Madrid, Spain. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. So as I said, we have been in lockdown. The world has been under lockdown. And here in Madrid, Spain, it's been one of the hardest hit, as you all know. And it's been around 47 days, and now the government is slowly announcing de-escalation measures over the next 8 weeks in a very phased and controlled manner. So while Spain is going through this, and just to indicate how severe the impact is, in fact, what experts say here in Spain is that the economy is going to constrict by around 9%. When you compare that, with, India, for instance, I think India is on a much less shaky ground. Now, when Pavitra and Kela started suggested this idea, I thought this was very relevant for anyone who is going, through a career transition or is considering one or looking at, maybe changing or shifting their focus. And I thought, some of these things some of these ideas that would be helpful for anyone who is contemplating that change. But before we get into that, and most of you already would probably be aware of this because, there's a lot of information right now available to all of us. But just wanted to point out some of the things that are happening around the world from an economic standpoint. Now, the global economic cost of the virus, according to Asian Development Bank, is around 2 to 4 trillion. Now, what is difficult is because the pandemic is still not really contained, it's very difficult to really estimate that this is going to be the final figures, right? And if you look at, an interesting fact that IMF pointed out was that just the cumulative loss to global GDP over the next 1 year is going to be a total of around 9 trillion, more than the economies of Japan and Germany combined. Now, as you said, Spain is going around, has been in lockdown for a few weeks now. India continues to be under lockdown, and this is further extended. And all these estimates for India's growth as well has been made before the extension of the lockdown. But unfortunately, we are in a situation where lockdown seems to be the only possible way at this point to contain the spread. Now, interestingly, when India went into complete lockdown, and this is the largest ever in the history of the world, as you know, we have, been losing, what experts are saying is that we are losing around 32,000 crores on a daily basis because, most of the factories are shut down, businesses are shutting, things like that. However, there is still a silver lining, because if you look at India, India is one of the only country, along with China, which is predicted to have a positive growth come next year, even with the pandemic going. Now, that is a very positive sign for people who are, especially job seekers and businesses, and for the country as a whole. And what it would require is a lot of, combined effort, a multi-pronged, targeted approach, really, to help, with good policies, good relief packages, private sector participating wholeheartedly, and a lot of citizen support. Now, one of the things in some of the forums that I have been and where we have been discussing is the refocus on Make in India. Now, as you know, Make in India over the last 5 years is a lot of focus on making it easier for investors to come in, and domestic investors also to work in the country. And there's a lot of reforms that have been going on. And in fact, there is going to be further reforms on those paths, especially I think there should be reforms around the labor and land areas, and even in exit clauses. And most of the states are also gearing up to welcome companies from Japan and Korea, US, some of the other companies who are trying to look to diversify their portfolio and focus, not purely focus on China. We are all talking about a new normal now in the post-COVID world, and these are all again things that we feel are going to happen for the next couple of years, at least. Social distancing until a vaccine comes, that's going to be the norm. Like out on the street here, if you just step out, you will see that most of the people are now, particular about wearing masks. In supermarkets, they have imposed that 2-meter distance rule. So things have changed. No longer is, a trip to the supermarket a simple affair any longer. Things like sanitization, these are flying off the shelf. That will continue. Hygiene, cleaning, all of those habits will continue to thrive. Couple of things that most of the things that I've written here, all of you already know. But a couple of things I wanted to highlight is the importance, the renewed focus on health and wellness. One of the sectors that has been affected very badly is tourism, travel and tourism. Now, what we are hearing is that is going to be that's the first one that has been hit, but it's also going to be the last one to recover, because in the post-COVID world, with all these travel restrictions, people are not going to be able to move freely as before. But when it does come back, there will be a renewed focus on what they're predicting, health and wellness. So, a state like Kerala may stand to benefit, because, we look at Ayurveda and wellness and all of those things. So, these are some of the thoughts that experts are talking about in terms of when the recovery starts to happen. As you already know, online entertainment and online learning, there have been massive surges on those platforms. I think I got a message that the audio is jarring, so hopefully you can still hear me. Let me do a small, Pavitra, can you hear me? Is it clear, or do I need to move around a bit? Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. As we like I was saying, the online platforms and digital payments and things like that will only get even more, higher in demand as we go along. Now, most of the audience, I'm assuming, have tech-related backgrounds based on what we had discussed previously. And as you know, technology will continue to drive the recovery. It will be critical for companies to adopt relevant technology. And as you know, things like telemedicine, for instance, has really spiked. And in India too, the government has relaxed some of the regulations around telemedicine, which means that doctors, a registered medical practitioner, can provide consulting to any person across India. And with that, and especially with the COVID-19 situation, what has been found is that there's been a 70% spike in telemedicine, in consultations, in online consultations. The other thing, as you know, robotics, drones, these are things that are going to be here to stay, because drones, as you know, enterprise drones are being used for delivery of medical supplies, of food, of other essentials. And with the spike in, remote working, things like cyber, data security, all those will also be in huge demand. And of course, as the world has found out, with a lot of dependency on certain firms and regions for the supply chain, companies will also look a lot more into adoption of Industry 4.0 technology, especially things like automation, looking at AI, looking at IoT. All of those things will definitely surge. Now, one of the interesting things I came about, when during various discussions, was how will the employee evolve during this period? Now, this is, and if you can see the slide, the evolution of the employee. Now, this is taken from a book by a futurist called Jacob Morgan, who talks about the evolution of employee. And this book was written in 2014, but I think the future that we are talking about is already happening. It's here, right? This is no longer a thing that we are talking that is going to happen over the next couple of years. Most of the companies have suddenly or were forced to shift to work from home, work remotely mode. And this is going to continue to a large extent. You've already read about companies like TCS, who are moving from 25% of their people working remotely to 75%. Their entire operating model is changing. Unilever is looking at something similar. Big Four, a lot of Big Four firms have already done this. In fact, when I was working in Canada 6-7 years ago, because of the cost of real estate and other costs associated, they were encouraging consultants who were anyway on the road most of the time to work remotely, and were providing the technology that would help that seamless transfer to working from home. Also, most of us, in product companies especially, are talking about bring your own device. Now, that is also going to happen, we think, because that is the only way to get things moving along. Also, some of the other interesting points that this Jacob Morgan highlights is the way we work, we choose work, is also going to change. For instance, employees will start to look at what are the preferences, how would they like to work, how much of travel would they want to do. In fact, firms like Deloitte are already offering mass customization program. I think I just got a message saying that, have you moved on from the first slide? In fact, I have moved on multiple slides. I'm very sorry, because technology does not seem to be cooperating right now. Let me just see. Can anybody see this slide? The way we work has been transformed. That is slide 7, in fact. Can you see?
No, I can still see the economic impact as a result of COVID-19 on my screen.
Okay. How about now?
No.
I am sharing.
Hello, ma'am. Prajit here.
Yes.
Ma'am, I guess this is a network issue with some of the audience over there, because most of the audience can see your presence live. The way we work has been transmitting. So I guess it is a network issue with some of the locations. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry about the disruption, but can we continue?
Yes, ma'am. You may continue. Yeah.
Okay. Coming back to, obviously there are still areas to be worked on when you're working from home, but coming back to to what we were talking about in terms of, customizing your work. Now, Deloitte already, and Big Four firms usually are quite advanced, when it comes to changing the way the employees operate. They allow, in fact, twice a year, to kind of have people look at the work preferences and maybe change some of the way, some of the areas that they want to work, which I think, as the way that we are working right now has evolved so much that, and I'll come to that on a later slide where we talk about how things have changed from, you're not looking at a progressive career ladder, but instead you're looking at ways because of the way changes in technology, operating models, business priorities, things like that. And that will continue, or it is here to stay, and more companies will try to embrace this to stay ahead of the curve. In fact, the other point that we want to say is most of the companies are now open to sharing knowledge. Most of the employees are also open to sharing information. Gone are the ages when we used to hoard information, but now we want to be on crowdsourcing, crowdsourcing ideas. We want to be on platforms like Facebook, Workplace, and things like that, where we put out an idea and we would like to get more people coming and sharing their thoughts. I think that is going to stay, and it'll only get stronger. Also, in this stage, anyone can become a leader. It's not that you have to be in a certain industry, have certain number of years stacked to your, yourself to be if seen as a leader. For instance, you can be someone who's built expertise in a particular language, application, any of these, or sector, any of these areas, and by contributing your content, you are putting yourself out as a subject matter expert. And which is why a lot of companies are also embracing things like reverse mentoring, because a leader no longer can rely on around him or his peer group to get information. But if he has to work with an increasingly millennial workforce, you need to be able to talk to people, youngsters who would be able to bring out some great ideas and things like that. So that will continue to thrive. I think it will only become stronger. Also, as you all know, reliance on collaboration technologies, that I think with COVID, we've been forced to, those things have absolutely surged. There is also focus on adaptive learning. Now, what is adaptive learning? Like, you learn something, but it's not just to get the knowledge from it, but you need to know how you can apply that to a situation as well. And finally, learning and development, learning and teaching has become so democratized that anyone from a CEO to a student to an early joiner needs to be able to upskill and reskill and be a student lifelong, because that is the only way that you can stay relevant and be able to contribute and be successful in whatever you are doing. I'm moving to the next slide. Hopefully all of you can see this. So while the employees are changing, there is also some points for consideration for the employer too. And I think this COVID-19 has forced most employers to actually rethink the way they do business. And it's an opportunity to reimagine. And of course, there is no one size fits all theory as the world transforms, but companies and people managers and HR departments and all of them will have to look at what are really the new roles that are going to be required now in a post-COVID world. How do we upskill and reskill? I mean, do we have the right skill mapping done already to understand the levels of expertise that your employees have? Or, where are the gaps? Where do we really need to go? You really need to know strategically where your company is going to be going. And very importantly, companies will have to, look and focus on their stakeholders. And by that stakeholders, I mean essentially employees. So you have to look at the well-being of your workforce, physiological, psychological, financial, because we're going through tremendous, unprecedented times where this is the time when there's a lot of stress on both, the employee as well as the employer. But so they need to work together, collaborate. Continue to invest in tech infrastructure. If you need to be able to give flexibility to your workforce, you need to enable the right technical infrastructure to allow that collaboration and remote working. And of course, as you know, the people HR function, they will need to reset to meet this new changed post-COVID world, to meet the new purpose and the potential and the perspective, because everything has changed from what was before to now looking at how the trends have evolved, and what we were talking about would eventually happen is now already here. And of course, adding alternate workers. This is a gig economy, and that is going to continue. And we talked about, I mentioned a little bit about career waves, where people are going to come in and go out, so which means things like career transition, those are going to have to be looked at, evaluated carefully by the employers. Now, moving on to next slide. One of the things that we often talk about, and I know because this is also hosted by Kerala Startup Mission, there's a lot of interest in being an entrepreneur, being your own boss. That comes with a lot of excitement, challenge, but also its own fair share of challenges. Now, startup in India, I mean, that has become almost like the marching anthem for the last couple of years. And as you know, India is the third largest startup nation in the world. There's a lot of incentives and support coming in from both central government as well as state government. And the investment raised has been going up, and they contribute to around 2.6% of the total jobs created in India. And interestingly, a recent survey that they did on college graduates indicated that 2/3 of them wanted to actually pursue entrepreneurship. And where, in early days, most people wanted to get on to, having a steady private sector or a government job. Now things are changing, and entrepreneurship, especially for women, is also extremely important because that's a clear way to harness women's economic potential. And, interestingly, what I also see, especially in Kerala, when the last few years were been there, there's a lot of women who are doing things out from their homes. And you can see the creativity and the drive that is coming in. Some of them are getting support. Some of them are purely doing it out of passion, out of their homes. Now, most of them are probably not even recorded in this, 14% of startups founded by women entrepreneurs. But what I would encourage people is who are women who are already doing this, who need support. There are a lot of resources out there. Startup India, Kerala Startup Mission, all of them offer a lot of hand-holding. And you should go and talk to folks, check out their websites to understand how they can take these tools, especially when, right now where people are hesitant, especially to start anything or invest in. A couple of things, even when the world looks bleak for especially the early startups, especially because of, difficulty probably in raising fresh capital, and they are all really in a survival mode. There is still opportunities. Like we mentioned, how technology adoption is only going to spike. So when you look at that, areas like fintech, health tech, dairy tech, agri tech, ed tech, all of those will continue to thrive because that is going to be the new norm in a post-COVID-19 world. And as I said, government is already a lot of incentives to and incentives and support and handholding and looking at relief packages for Indian entrepreneurs as well. Invest India, which runs the Startup India program, has also launched something called the Business Immunity Platform. Now, these are for small businesses as well as for the large businesses. This is again another way for companies or entrepreneurs to reach out and get their queries and answered, and any kind of support to connect them with others who might be in a similar situation, or someone who is willing to invest. So check out these kind of online platforms because they are very helpful at a time when the whole world is going through this crisis. Now, one of the interesting things, in a lot of startup discussions that have happened is, while there's a lot of positive things happening around startups, one of the things that keeps coming out is the need, entrepreneurs themselves, to need to work on closing the skills gap. Now, this is not just the technical skills, but also the soft skills, right? Whether it is critical thinking, logical reasoning, building relationships, network, communication, things like that. I think there are areas for improvement. Now, a lot of Indian entrepreneurs, when you're looking to hire people, you also tend to look at, people who are already working somewhere. But in my opinion, and where I have seen, there are cases where there has been successful, is startups, and as part of trying to close that skills gap, should consider people who are currently going through a career transition or who are looking to come back into the workforce, and hire them, because these folks come with extremely, a lot of experience in organizational management. They had decided to take a career break for whatever reason, which means they are not really risk averse. They bring the right lot of leadership skills, time management. So a lot of things like that could actually help. And this is another way to bridge that skills gap while continuing to invest in a lot of learning and development. I know we are running short of time, so I'm going to quickly get into this. One of the, when I thought about, this topic, the way I see it when you're taking a career break or a sabbatical or career transition is, it could be very rewarding if you manage it effectively. Now, if you look at the cycle, what I think is, you've taken the first step, which is the pause, right? But it's a time for you to reflect, to grow, to evaluate yourself, become even better and contribute even more strongly when you get back into the workforce. So this is a cycle. These are the phases that I believe one goes through as you manage your career transition. Couple of things that anyone can do. As I said before, career waves are replacing the career ladders, the traditional career pyramid, the career ladders. Now, career waves is interesting. You can, if you were to look at an analogy, it is like a surfer, right? You when you see the high wave, you catch the crest, then it goes down, you get back into the beach, then you wait again, then you catch the next wave. So career waves are something like that, and that can be, looked at similar to some of these technologies that are coming up. You have to keep skilling yourself in them, catch the crest when they are in high demand, and then of course keep skilling up as and when new things are coming up. Now, interestingly, and this probably most of you know, millennials would definitely, a majority of them would consider a career break in some point of their career. And this was, very different to the earlier generations who thought, okay, you get in 30 years, you're going to be working and you save for your retirement. That kind of era is gone. And as Pavitra said in the beginning, a lot of women, a majority, 70% of women take the career break because due to various family or personal reasons. Now that you have taken or decided to take or want to take, you should, reflect basically on what has worked for you well in the past, what has probably not really worked well for you. And you need to be really honest here when you're doing your skills assessment. Am I good at this? Am I, moderately good? Do I need really, some help? And based on that, you can really look at what are the kind of skill sets you need to train yourself in or reskill in. Or maybe it is an entirely new area that you want to do because, you feel that you have some transferable skills, but you want to really look at some new sector. So for that, you're basically realigning yourself, and you look and you do your skills mapping first, your personal skills mapping first. Talk to someone you trust who can give you honest feedback. Get a mentor if possible. That always helps when you're talking to someone from a professional or personal area who can give you that strong feedback. And while doing that, make sure, when you keep abreast of industry trends. Staying away from work does not mean that you completely stay away from, what is happening in that industry. You need to keep, whether you're on maternity leave or you're on some other personal break, you need to keep yourself up to date on what's going on. And right now, especially with COVID, the number of online courses, in fact, most of the universities are moving out some of their courses entirely into online digital platforms. And you need to look at some of these. Sorry, do I hear something? Can you hear? Can everyone hear?
Yes, we can hear you, Suja.
You have to look at mass, there are so many massive open online courses that are on offer, or, that you can look through, and really, even if you have to invest your time and some money into it, you should do it, because if you feel that is relevant. Because when you come back from your break, and you're talking about, you can then really share how you were able to utilize the time off, whether it was 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, doesn't matter, as long as you had a plan and you were going through it. Also, one of the very important things, and this is whether you are thinking of a career transition or not, you have to stay connected. And by staying connected means you have to be on the right platforms, like I said, learning about the industry, keeping abreast of the industry events, but you also need to leverage your personal and professional network, because a lot of that traditional hiring has been replaced. Now, a lot of the hiring comes through LinkedIn, for instance, or some of the other social media platforms where people, are visible and talking about something, and and recruiters or HR folks find them online. So also, if you are, have the time, it is always advisable to volunteer your time for things that you think could help you as well in your future roles, right? So whether be it, so the important thing is, when you're volunteering, choose activities that are strategic importance. So that is something that you would like to do, and that strengthens your CV. And finally, when you're looking through various, looking already, you've done your online courses, you've reskilled, you feel that you want to start looking at getting back into the workforce. A lot of companies, again, coming back to the big four firms, a lot of them, as well as a lot of IT companies, offer these return to work, re-entry programs. So that is almost like an internship, but it's just for the experienced folks who are coming back into the workplace. And so, it takes around, for them, they run about 12 to 20 weeks of these time to get the person back into the entire work mode and make them feel comfortable as well. So look at companies like that who may be open to rehiring. But I would say that as this goes, it is no longer about you can. It's mostly about what are the skills that you bring, what is your experience, rather than have you taken a break, what were you doing. As long as you can be honest and transparent about it and talk about what were the things that there are genuine reasons for why people take breaks. You can explain what you were doing during that period. I think this is well accepted as we go along. Now, one of the things I would encourage people to look at when you are getting offers, and especially one thing I would like to highlight is do not get discouraged, because in the post-COVID world, it might take a little longer, but you have to stay positive. You're bringing a great value proposition. Like I said, returners who are coming, who startups may want to hire, bringing a lot of experience. So that is your value proposition. Plus you have done skills, updating of skills. These are things that any company would choose to have people like that back on their roles. But when you get an offer, you should evaluate the following before you accept. I mean, salary and compensation and benefits is one thing, but more importantly than that, what is the substance? What is the content? What is the real role? What is the scope of that role? A title does not define anything. You can get a title, but you may not have the real scope that is commensurate with your skills and experience. So really look through that carefully. Second, is there room for me to grow in that company? Do I need to, once I get back, you don't want to be jumping out again. And also employers don't want people who want to come back, and they may be hesitant because they may worry, is that person going to leave you again? So you need to talk and figure out whether is there growth for me in that company over the next few years. One very important criteria, do they encourage learning and development? I can't stress this enough, because if you look at a lot of companies who say theirs is a good workplace, are investing in learning and development initiatives. In fact, most of the millennials, a majority of the millennials, prefer to work in a company, and they call it a good place to work if there is enough learning and development opportunities. So you have to look at whether that is a company that is going to offer you these kind of avenues for personal and professional development. Again, right now, the whole world is on remote working, and you have that flexibility. But post-COVID, and especially for young moms and women, or for whatever reason they have taken that break, you may need to balance both your work and your life. And does that job offer you that flexibility where you can really say your preferences, and there is time where you are allowed to continue working from home, or at least for a certain period? And so things like that are important for you to look into when you are getting offers. And finally, to summarize, what I feel, career break can be extremely rewarding. We talk about sabbaticals, we talk about, taking a break, but it takes a lot of courage, I would also say, for people who to take that step, because it can be daunting. You worry about how do we get back into the workplace, but keep a positive mindset, use that time really, well, to reimagine and reinvent yourself. Yes, they might be tough on your finances for some time, but with proper planning and budget management, you can control your expenses and make sure that you have your savings going along until you find the right opportunity to jump back in. Also, don't be wedded to one sector. A lot of these sectors, and especially if it is technology, you can look at, you should look at your skills that can be transferred to any sector. I mean, sectors like automobile sector, anyway, a lot of automation and things like that are continuing and will continue to happen. But you look at what are your transferable skills. Even if you may not have the full domain expertise, look at what are the skills that you can use to transfer to another sector. Most of the people who are hiring now look at not just your technical skills, but they look at your other system domain expertise as well, and how well you're able to adapt. And so these are important. And when you're doing your resume also, please ensure that these things come out in your CV. In fact, your CV should be focused on what your skills and experiences are, rather than just a chronological order of what you've been doing. Take assignments, opportunities that are handed on to you, even if it is probably voluntary, because it's good for you to stay abreast of what is going on in the corporate world. Also, as I said, make yourself visible in these social media forums. Join the conversation. Post relevant comments if you think that is relevant to that discussion. Also, in a post-COVID world, while we would like to work remotely, there is also things for the employee to consider. You may not get the location choice that you want, but you may need to move to another city, state. You will have to be open to all of that. But in the end, what the most important thing is to keep a very positive mindset and approach it, because your attitude and your approach should also be positive, in the sense that you are coming back stronger than ever before. You have a great value proposition. You are courageous enough to take that break, and you have learned additional things which could benefit the employer, and keep yourself skilled. So that's about it. I think we have a little bit of time left for the questions, but thank you for listening. And, please feel free to connect with me. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can also email me anytime. Thank you. Over to you, Pavitra.
Okay. Thank you, Suja. We have some questions that came up during your presentation. One of the first few was related to the lockdown. What could be the adverse effect of the lockdown and the recession in the future labor market and the workplace?
Okay. So as I said, obviously there is going to be an impact. Now, the interesting thing is nobody can clearly say what exactly it is going to be and how severe. They all know broadly, yes, it's going to be severe. There are going to be some industries that may do better in the short run than some of the others. And in those areas, they will need to look at workforce and hiring people to meet the demand. Whereas in some other sectors, it will take a little while for them to come back into that, normal mode. So, which is why I also stress the importance of having transferable skills, right? You don't really need to be wedded to something that you read, but you can show these are areas that you can use to change your sector at this point. But as of now, I think every single sector except for the few ones, even they are going to be impacted, because we don't know when the pandemic will actually end. So right now, it is whatever information economic experts are putting out their theories and their forecasts, but these are things that are going to be changing.
Okay, thank you. We have another question which is very specific to purchasing. It says, Corona has made people learn things which are produced or processed in local markets. Do you foresee any shift from global markets to local markets? And does that mean the educated will turn agri-entrepreneurs?
Yeah, good question. And I think, in the short term, yes, especially since all of the, borders are closed and there's a lot of restrictions on movement. And, the world has also realized that, dependency on a certain region or a country or a firm has in fact impacted their own, production, manufacturing, supply chains, things like that. So when that is happening, the countries, nations, companies tend to look inward, closer home. What can we do? And that also leads to, as the question was suggested, startups looking at, especially in some of the sectors that we talked about, whether it is fintech, edtech, health tech, all of those areas. But of course, in the long run, you have to be part of an integrated global supply chain. You cannot always have, because the costs may not allow you, at the end of the day, the bottom line won't allow you to continue that on a long term. But in the immediate short term, yes, the people will be looking locally. And the great thing about India is India has a huge consumer market that also has the requirement for all of the products that are produced, which is why things like Make in India, as I was saying, will come into greater focus. And some of the other countries are looking to shift their manufacturing to countries like India. Domestic and the focus will also be right now a lot on the essential areas, essential goods, essential supply services. And certain things will come in quicker. Some of the other things will stay.
Okay. We have a question now related to the educational sector. This is from Carol. What are your insights on reforms in the educational sector in the post-COVID scenario? And there's a related question to education. Is it worth spending money to get certificates from edX or Coursera?
Okay. So, again, education as we know it, this is one of the essential services. It will continue, whether, whatever the things happen. Only thing is the mode at which, how it has been delivered from a traditional brick and mortar, schools and colleges. A lot of things are going into digital. Here in Spain, they're talking about opening schools and universities only by September, late fall, if things are under control. And that is similarly the case anywhere else in the world. So online platforms, online learning will surge. Now, coming to that specific and the reforms, in terms of reforms, is again looking at the curriculum, right? I mean, there has been already a lot of talk even within Kerala. When I was with Nissan, there's a lot of conversations that was happening with the government as well as the academicians around reforming the curriculum itself, because you need to be job ready. And like I said, right now, you have to pick on adaptive learning. It's not just about learning something, but it's just about how can you apply that to the job that you're doing. So it is focused on application. You need to be job ready. You cannot, so you need to get a plethora of skills. For instance, STEM is changing, as you know, a lot of you must have already read, to STEAM, which means that A stands for the art side that is coming in, whether it's literature, philosophy, psychology, you name it, because people need to have, along with technical skills, very good soft skills, whether it is, communication, relationship building, whether it is negotiations, presentations, logical thinking, reasoning. All of this would require a combination of skills, which means that your education should also be reformed. At the same time, I did mention, in terms of looking at these courses, Coursera, right now, I think until June or July, a lot of them are offering free courses, right? If you have to get the certificate, you need to pay a little bit. But a lot of them are offering free certification, which you should really go in and check out. And there is a plethora of them right now, Coursera, Udemy, all of them have different things to offer. I would also say some of these very good universities, even Ivy League, those are putting out very interesting online education. Like if you are an experienced professional, you have some years and you want to get into that executive education, for around, and if you have enough money saved and you're thinking of investing in something good, for 2 to 3 lakhs, you can get a 6-week, 8-week, 10-week course on management or any of the technical courses from a very good Ivy League university as well. So in fact, it might be good for you to go through and some of these course sites and look at what really fits the area that you want to be in, or where you see yourself going along, or where are the areas that you would like some additional training, and then choose accordingly. I would definitely think getting those certificates are important at this time.
Okay. We have a question now from Betsy Jose. Her question is, sometimes the position offered, maybe for example, as a content writer, but when you read the job specs, it includes anything and everything possible. And the offer of remuneration doesn't come anywhere close to a decent figure. One needs to work and get experience, but how does one tackle such offers without being a total sellout?
Yeah, no, it is, at the end of the day, and especially post-COVID, I think the job market is also going to be a little more tougher. But at the same time, where, you've drawn a line, right, beyond which you will not go as well. At the same time, you look at it holistically. You look at what is the job, what does that job have to offer? What is the chances of you progressing in that job? If I were to take something else, which is not core to this job, what does that entail? Do you work for somebody? You're reporting to someone else? Do you actually, does that get covered under your performance? All of those things, you need to look at it holistically and see. And when you're taking a job, you also need to look at, okay, what is the next beyond this, right? I mean, it could be within the same company, of course, but you need to think of 2 steps ahead in terms of what next for me. If I take a job as a content writer, I'm not going to be happy just being a content writer. I might want to, widen my skill set, right? And but so as long as you think what they are offering is fair enough, is part of what the market will offer, and what you bring to the table is also, I think you should be able to, negotiate that, because at the end of the day, if you take something where you're not happy, that is going to hit you from the day you start doing the work. However, right now, most jobs are not really defined as, okay, this is A to Z, this is what you do. In a lot of companies that you join, especially if they're setting up new startup, additional responsibilities will come your way, and that's a given. But as long as you know this is a good learning experience for me, this is going to show well on my resume when I'm going to, again, further broaden my career, look at it from that angle. But of course, if they're going to expect you to do a lot of work for, and really the compensation doesn't get anywhere near you, you will need to negotiate it a little bit better. That being said, what you need to do is, you put some ground rules. Beyond, this is where the limit to which I can go, and do a pros and cons about that particular job. Is it going to help me in the long run? These additional responsibilities, will it help me with my career, with my experience? These are something that can be transferable, that I can use for some other area. So take it step by step. And of course, be prepared to give and take on both sides, but don't just give in and give exactly to what they're saying.
Very balanced view and advice, Suja. We now have something that's connected to manufacturing. How do you see new chances in manufacturing? What are the challenges? Can we also make use of some lost opportunities from China by other countries? Okay, I think what the question basically means is, can we make use of the opportunities that are getting diverted from China?
Yeah. As I said, Make in India is back in big time focus, all because countries have realized that their dependency. I mean, they were all part of a global supply chain, but really they're part of a supply chain that is really steeped in China, and there's an over dependency, and it was shown to the world when we were looking at masks for procurement, and there wasn't really enough. And it was all had to come from China, and that's when people started realizing that things had to change. Now, a lot of countries, and you yourself would have read reports, a lot of articles where on Japan investing and looking at helping companies shift their factories and diversify their supply chain from China. Korea is also doing the same thing. US is also doing the same thing. Now, this is an opportunity definitely for India. So also are others in the game, like Vietnam and some of the other South Asian countries. However, India has some advantages which the others don't have. Like, for instance, even when you look at the economic growth, we are still going to be one of the only country other than China that is still going to be on a positive outlook. we have enough manpower, right? We have the facilities, and government is working really on reforming some of these areas that have been pointed out as things that have slowed down the investment. So with all of that support and states offering, other additional incentives and organizations like Invest India to handhold investors, I think the FDI coming in is going to only go up. And also, we already know things like pharmaceuticals. India is way ahead of some of all the others. In fact, we are the kind of supplier to the world right now. We are focusing now on, bringing up our medical device parks and pharma parks back into, play very quickly, so that we can become the supplier and continue to be the supplier to the world. So I think it is going to be more positively for manufacturing here in India, especially around the essential supplies. And government, while they have extended this lockdown to protect its citizens, they're also opening up in terms of some of the SEZs, if they are not in a hotspot, are opened up. The export industrial estates that have access control have opened up. So these are things slowly. It has to be in a phased manner. And I'm sure the lockdown experts in government are reviewing it very closely as they go along, because it's essential that India should utilize this opportunity to take some of the investments into the country.
Okay. This question is on exports. It's a fairly general question from Dr. Rajesh Pingavil. What kind of changes can we expect in exports?
Okay, that's a very broad question. So I'm not sure if we can, provide. But here is, like I said, the export zones or the parts are slowly easing up their restrictions so that they can get back to work. Right. At the same time, what the country usually does is there enough supply for the country before you start exporting? India can, prior to all of this COVID, we were looking at becoming an export market, right? And that, it's just that in the interim right now, all of it is looking at domestically, do we have enough for the demand and supply that's going to be here? And then we are also looking at how do we get more people to come in here, investors come here, and that means more jobs and all of that, which bodes well for the economy. And then, of course, how do we get a greater chunk of the global supply chain and become a major player? From a geographic position, we are in a very good position to really, be one of the stronger export markets. And part of Make in India's original vision was becoming a big exporter. So that those kind of reforms will continue to be reviewed and looked at as it goes along.
Okay. We have just 2 minutes, so one last question. What are your thoughts for budding entrepreneurs? Is this a good time to start?
I would, at the end of the day, like I said, certain areas, it's always showing a lot of demand. But at the end of the day, whether it is COVID or not, it all depends on what is it that you're offering, right? What is your product? What is your service? Is that something that is in demand, that is required? You have a real good, strong business model, business case for that, then it is the right time. And those are things that you need to, kind of look and really be able to articulate and be able to understand, is this the right time to go if you have a strong product or service? So, look at it, talk to a few experts, talk to mentors and see, and it all depends. At the end of the day, sometimes these these times, the crazy times are what, brings out budding entrepreneurs and helps really launch a huge career or start. So it's always a good time as long as you have the right product or service.
Okay. One last question, and this is because it's a little specific to Kerala. Any special advice for the soon-to-be Gulf returned professionals? Will they survive in India? What do they have to do to get attention in the Indian job scenario?
Okay, so again, I think this is very tricky times, and it's good that government is helping, enabling folks to come back and help, and I think the society as a whole will need to kind of, and this is where in the initial period where I said the recovery will depend not just on good governance but also strong public policy, private sector participation, and really strong citizen support. Now, whether it is you're coming from the Gulf and you're starting your career, or from any part of the world, the norms or the guidelines remain the same, right? Your current skill set, is it able to match whatever is on offer right now? If not, would it be possible for you to upskill? For the time being, you may need to, is your skills transferable? So things like that. And I would think that the government or others would look at enabling options to support these folks, especially around skilling and reskilling, because at the end of the day, they need to find a job, and it may not be their pure core sector, but they would definitely have skill sets that can transfer. And for that, they might need some help. And this is where volunteer organizations or government and others would really help them get them back on their feet, and it should happen.
Okay. That was a very engaging and informative session, Suja. It covered a really wide audience across employers, across employees, those on a career break, plus freshers. So thank you very much. We hope the audience gained from this. We look forward to keeping track of what's happening in India and opportunities, especially in Kerala, and look forward to having you back in Kerala at some point in future, and working to make this a bright, vibrant space, which is known for its employment opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Pavitra. Thank you, Kerala Startup Mission. Thank you, Grand Ideas, for helping me with the graphics. And all of you on the call, thank you very much for listening in. I hope there is a lot that we can discuss and further can debate on. Like I said, please feel free to connect. Drop me a line if you have any questions, if there is any support and advice, guidelines, happy to contribute. In the meantime, wishing all of you very well. Stay safe, follow the guidelines, and practice social distancing, and this will only make us more resilient and emerge stronger into a better new normal. So thank you everyone for listening. Have a wonderful evening and rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.